Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. This is chapter 24b, the Tower of Babel. Now, again, before we begin, as always, going to say Psalms 117. Don't just, hear me say it. Please, I'm asking you, please say it with me, okay? This is for everyone's good, okay? Hallelu et Adonai, kol goim, shabechuhu, kol haomim, ki gavar aleinu chasdo, ve'emet Adonai le'olam, hallelujah. Thank you. Okay, let's get into it. We are picking up right where we left off last week. And this is also why this is coming out a day earlier, so we could, not lose the momentum over there. Let us build a great tower, they said, in its midst, ascending to heaven, for the power of the Holy One, blessed be He, is only in water, they said. We might be reading this and thinking, wow, okay, so these guys are just straight up stupid. Or are they more evil than stupid? They can't possibly think this is going to work, right? And yet, look around you now. See where you are living currently. The truth cannot be held down forever. And they, yes, they, are drowning in their lies. Which, by the way, it's pun intended, I guess, which, by the way, is all just a big distraction from what's really coming. Nevertheless, are these powers that be stupid? Are they dumb? Are they not aware of God's power over what is going on? Or are they just more evil than stupid? You see? It's the same concept of like a suicide bomber, Same concept of Amalek. And let us make us a great name on the earth, as it is said, and let us make us a name. Genesis 11:4. If you recall, we had several classes regarding the 5 kinds of Erev Rav. And I can direct you to the one called Identifying the Erev Rav. And there's another one, Identifying the Erev Rav, and then the End of the Erev Rav. But if you want to break down the categories, the 5 categories, Identifying the Erev Rav, you could look that up in the Tent of Abraham for more details on those. The reason I bring this up now is because the language is the same than what we see in Genesis 11:4. And they said, come, let us build a tower for ourselves, a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make ourselves a name. V'na'aseh lanu shem. Okay? We will make a name for ourselves. Na'aseh lanu shem. Now, Genesis 6:4, where it says, and they would bear for them, this is the sons of God, the daughters of men, they would bear for them. They are the mighty men who are of old, the men of renown. Men of renown, what does it say in the Hebrew? Because that's what counts. Hema hagiburim asher me'olam anshe Hashem. Na'aseh lanu shem anshe Hashem. The men of the name. Come, let us make a name for ourselves. These are the men of the name. You see this? As we discussed in those classes, these are the Giborim. That is that class of giants. The Giborim, one of the 5 kinds of Erev Rav. The reason the Erev Rav have that name, which generally translates as mixed multitude. Erev comes from, Erev is evening, but it's also me'urbav, le'arev, to confuse, to mix. And multitude, Rav, great, okay, is because they are mixed within Israel. That is why they're called Erev Rav. Erev Rav are not out in the world. You must understand. All right? Meaning they look like Jews, walk like Jews, talk like Jews, but they are anything but. Of this particular group says the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and you could read this in the Zohar. These are not even my words. These are rabbis who build synagogues and donate Torah scrolls for their name's sake and not for God's name's sake. They are building whatever they're doing is for their own selves. You see, this is the Erev Rav mixed within Israel. That and anything else that will grow from their own name. Now, it's funny to see what's happening in Israel now, how there are some well-respected rabbis who are calling out these Erev Rav rabbis. They're calling them, I'm watching these things, they're like, I'm telling you, Rabbanei Sheker, and he's calling them out, not by name. You don't call out by name, you call out by action. A rabbi who does this and this and this is not a rabbi. A rabbi, that's not a rabbi. And these are truths. I've done it here plenty of times, so you should actually know who's a real rabbi and who's not a real rabbi. There's no such thing as a messianic rabbi, okay? It's a title, you know? I'm the Tsar of Jerusalem, whatever, right? None of these things are real anyway. So, like I said, it's not by name, of course, but by screaming at what they are teaching and how they lead their people astray, calling them false rabbis. Here's what it says in the Torah. Here's what you're saying. Doesn't really work, does it? Plain and simple. For people to understand, because they're not going to stop doing what they're doing, obviously. So the people should wake up. Who are you following? So like we said, the only way you can tell these groups apart are based on their words and their actions. And that's why, how do you know if a teacher is a false teacher? You have to really understand and learn Torah. Because a learned person in Torah would never listen to a Messianic rabbi. Like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking. The things that you're saying and things that you're teaching, they go against Torah. And then you could go with the Reform or conservative rabbis. I'm like, okay, so you're driving on Shabbat. Clearly it says, you know, you cannot break Shabbat, and yet you're using technology on Shabbat, and yet that doesn't work either. We see that in the temple. There was separation between men and women coming to pray to God, and yet in your temple, men and women are sitting together. You see, words and actions will determine what category these people are in. Now, I'm not saying that all these people, you know, that some I gave examples of are Erev Rav per se, but this is how you can tell who's real and who's false based on the Torah. That is our guideline. I'm not making any of these things up. I'm just trying to educate for you. Okay. And you need to be so aware of this because of what I've seen. Unfortunately, there are many, and most are currently led astray. Communities just gone because what's-his-face said so. Anyway, this same group, aka the Giborim, are the ones who desired to build a tower and make a name for themselves, which we can read from the plain text. This is what we read in the Torah. Now we continue with our text. Rabbi Pinchas says, there were no stones there to build the city and the tower. Why? We discussed this. They went into a valley. They went into a plain. The place was actually completely flat, and the rocks, where the big stones, they're found in the mountains, right? Meaning they were nowhere near them, because this place had to be massive for a tower to reach that high. So what did they do? They baked bricks and burnt them like a builder would do. Now, do you realize the lengths they went in order to build in that very spot? Like, no, this is where we're going. This is where we're building this tower. Remember the grave site that they were building on top of that we discussed? Until they built it 70 mills high. How high is a biblical mil, right? 1 mil is 912 meters, okay? 70 mills, 70 times 912 is, I use the calculator obviously, 63,840 meters, or 63.84 kilometers high. 70 also is a hint at the 70 nations that are going to split as a result, and also 70 levels per nation. This is one of those try and suspend your disbelief moments, right? Remember, we are reading the Bible. We're reading the Torah. We just read about the flood and the giants. Believing this is much easier. So what kind of structure do you think they built? Like, again, if this was written flat out how high the tower was in the Torah, you'd be like, oh yeah, okay. But because it's in the Midrash, people have a hard time with that. And yet it's written everywhere. So it's not only in the Midrash. You could also find it in the Zohar. You could find it in the book of Jasher. All these things are out there right now. You couldn't fit all that in the Torah. Remember, our sages are the ones that compiled the Torah. It's on top of the 5 books of Moses, and which one of the Nevi'im and which ones of the Ketuvim came in there. The sages did that. Absolutely. Okay. So remember, what kind of structure do you think they built? Okay, remember, they needed a huge plane. Okay, so we're probably thinking, oh yeah, it's a really tall skyscraper. What's the highest building in the world, right? The Burj Al Arab or something in Dubai, all right? This building was so big, in fact, that it would house the entire population of the earth as well as the tower in its center. Okay, that's how big the area had to be. Most people think it looked like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? That it was kind of round and circular, minus the leaning part. But that would be architecturally impossible, especially when you get high up, right? That high, the altitude and the wind factor, that doesn't work. No. You need something steady, you need something stable with a very heavy base as each level becomes slightly smaller and lighter than that which was built upon it. You see what I'm saying? And so we're talking about the most popular structure from the ancient world, the pyramid. Like we said, there's plenty of pyramids still standing today, hundreds of them in Sudan, which is biblical Kush. And obviously Egypt and everywhere else around the world, you know where they are. They got those pyramids there. That was the structure for a very specific reason. And this was possible. And this was all possible that they built a tower that big, that high, only because all of humanity at that time worked together. Furthermore, since they were building this abomination upon the bones of all the abominable things which their reincarnated selves had created, because they are a reincarnation of the generation of the flood, they incorporated the forces of darkness to assist them in this task. They still had secrets, mind you. They still had these books that were passed down from Adam, a way to control angels, okay? All done through the holy tongue. That's another reason that God confused their tongues, so they would not be able to call upon the angels to help them do these things. You think the fallen angels were no longer around, though, at that point? Of course they were. Did they drown in the flood? No. They're immortal, right? I mean, until they're dead. But yeah, we've already learned that they are immortal in our sense, even though they fell from heaven. Not only that, but they can also shapeshift into any man or anything that they choose. We've also learned this. The Rashbi talks about this. Angels, they shapeshift. They go. You won't know who you're talking to. Oh, and so they were absolutely around during the Tower of Babel, right? As they still are today, counseling and advising those who seek to rebel against God and destroy his people Israel. Very simple. In all these places, that's the people I say. Those are the ones whispering in their ear, guiding them, telling them what, where, and how to do. But it's all coming to an end. So, what does this say? What does the text say? And it, the tower, had ascents, stairs, ma'alot, it says in Hebrew, on its east and on its west. So the Hebrew doesn't use the word madregot. Madrega is stairs, but rather ma'alot, like Shira Ma'alot, Song of Ascent, right? Just like the temple, our temple had 15 steps, as there are 15 songs of ascent from Psalms 120 to 124. So this was a very, very, very unholy temple. So as you are going up, perhaps you are also going down. Although it does say they went up in the east and they went down in the west, just like the sun. But we'll get to it. All right. But this transfer of power would come in the form of Joseph, who later had to ascend 70 steps, la'alot, 70 steps up to Pharaoh's throne in order to stand before him face to face, each step representing a different nation and its specific tongue, which the angel Gabriel taught Joseph the night before. He knew more languages than Pharaoh, and Pharaoh at that time knew more magic than all of Egypt combined. So every level you step, you gotta speak that language. You go up one level, another level, another level. Joseph made the whole thing. That's why Pharaoh's like, okay, I'm gonna keep you right here. Remember, I brought you here. This is God handing the nations over to Joseph, right? It started with their steps, and now it's coming to our steps. So God handed over the nations and all the power that be to Joseph. Who is the nation in charge? It was Egypt, meaning from Ham, okay? Finally a slave to Israel. And later on, the 70 souls of Israel that descended to Egypt would be with him, the 70 soul rather. The laborers who took up the bricks went up on the eastern ascent, and those who descended went down on the western descent, right? What rises in the east and sets in the west? Sun worship, perhaps? Okay, if a man fell and died, they paid no heed to him. But if a brick fell, they sat down and wept and said, Ay vey, They said, woe is us. When will another one come in its stead? A brick. Because it said it would take a year to get from the bottom, to get a brick from the bottom all the way to the top. A year. People are celebrating birthdays all throughout. So this is another hint towards the slavery of Israel in Egypt, as they ascribed a higher value to the brick than they did to human life. Which also shows you all their lovey-dovey working together towards a common goal was a big fat lie, right? Oh yeah, look, humanity working together in a new world order. But really, they couldn't care less about people. So the whole thing is a farce. Okay, so the year was 1996, and Babylon didn't have a care in the world. Everybody was enjoying themselves as Bill Clinton was the reigning king, the leader of the free world. More specifically, though, the year was 1996 to the creation of the world, and Babylon could care less about the world. Everybody was enjoying themselves as Nimrod was the reigning king, the leader of the free world. At which time our father Abraham was 48 years old. And Abram, son of Terah, passed by and saw them building the city and the tower. Why does our text mention his father? It was always Abram, right? Abram or Abraham. Now Abram, son of Terah. Why? Because his father was one of the builders of the tower. That's why. To show how far he was removed from idolatry and from rebellion. And what did Abraham do? And he cursed them in the name of his God, who never spoke to him yet, right? That comes 4 years later. Right, yeah, he was thrown in the fire at age 50. And then he started moving towards Israel in 52, which was the end of this time. Okay, in other words, 4 years later, that's the 2000. We end the age of Toh, and we're going to the 2000 years of Torah. Abraham's the one that ushered that in. Okay, so and he cursed them in the name of his God, as said in Psalms 55:10, destroy, O Lord, divide their tongue, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. Bala Adonai palag leshonam, dor hapalaga, right? Divide their tongue, the generation of the division, dispersion. Ki raiti Hamas. Hamas is remnant of reminiscent of what they did in the earth before the flood happened, right? Vatimale haaretz Hamas, right? Veriv ba'ir. So by the way, you should read Psalms 55 for an understanding, actually, of what Abraham was going through at that time, as this song is about the tower and that generation, written by David, of course. So the word bala, which means to swallow, translates here as destroy, is exactly what God did to the tower. Well, a third of it anyway, but we'll get to that soon. Why did Abram curse them? Because he saw through their lies, straight up. And it was Abraham who prayed for them not only to be destroyed, but specifically for God to confuse their tongue. From one, the holy tongue, Hebrew, to many. Now you could ask, okay, so why didn't he pray for them? Because he saw what they did. When he prayed for Sodom and Gomorrah, he did not know Sodom and Gomorrah. Perhaps there are 50 righteous, or 45, or 40, or 30, or 20, or 10. No. There's nothing that I could do then, right? But here he saw them. They were all one language. Everyone was involved in this. All the inhabitants of the earth were involved in this, including his father. So you know the guy didn't actually play favorites. Now you'd be like, okay, wait, so Abraham cursed his father. How could that be? If you curse your parents, you die, right? Yeah, well, here's the thing. And this is what I hope you guys understand. Who are the first 3 commands about, right? It's all about God. So we know this. We learned this in elementary school. Absolutely, you must honor and fear your parents. Never disrespect your parents. However, if your parents tell you to do something that goes against God, you are obligated to not listen to them, because God always comes first. This is exactly this case, right? Okay. Although they claimed that they were a one world order, all for the sake of the betterment of mankind, right? Look what mankind has done for its sake. Every invention that has been invented for the betterment of mankind has been taken out of mankind's hands, if you will, and used into weapons, right? Splitting the atom, nuclear energy, what can we do with that? But no, let's make a bomb with that. That's better. What about free energy? What about Nikola Tesla, right? Powering all these cities with zero pollution. Well, he was taken out, wasn't he? What about cars that drive on water without gasoline? Also taken out of the equation. You see what kind of world we're living in. Okay, betterment of mankind. So I say again, open your eyes and ears, and the truth cannot be held down forever. And again, if you want to see these things, you can absolutely see them. Most people don't want to see it because they really have a hard time coming to grips with what reality really is. I've seen it. Listen, when I started picking up these things in 2015, I was pretty close to losing my mind. I mean, because all these things are coming in, right? It's like, here, Matrix, right? They never free a mind. They never show a person the truth at such a later age. Usually it's younger people, right? Because it's easier for them to adapt. So when a full-grown person in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or whatever, all of a sudden the veil is lifted and you see what kind of world we live in, they're like, no. I'm going to stay here. I do not believe you. I just read something in the Secret War Against the Jews. Get that book, please. Okay? When a Holocaust survivor who actually managed to flee Auschwitz while the death camps were still in rotation, fled to the States, went before this judge, I forgot his name, who was a Jew, a Jewish judge in New York from the Supreme Court, and he told him, I'm a witness. This is what is currently happening in Auschwitz. The judge answered, all these things are on record. A Jew is telling another Jew who fled Auschwitz, I believe that you believe what you're saying, but I can't believe it. Not that I cannot believe this. I will not believe this. And so it continued. Atrocities done. Everyone in the world is guilty. Yes, everyone in the world. Watching Jews being cooked alive? No. Okay? Reckoning is coming. Anyway, that's another thing. And the curse that Abraham put on this new world order, it still stands today. But they rejected his words like a stone cast upon the ground. There's a hint in Psalms 118:22. The stone that the builders rejected became a cornerstone, right? Even ma'asu abonim hayta lerosh pina. Even ma'asu abonim, the stone that the builders, is equal to le'Avraham. Even ma'asu habonim le'Avraham. Same numerical value. Because Abraham, back then Abram, was the literal spiritual cornerstone for which the world was built, and they, the builders, the literal builders, rejected him. In reference to this verse, our text says, it is not a fact that every choice and good stone is only put at the corner of a building, right? So you need more than one cornerstone, right? Well, of course it is. 4 corners of the chariot of God in this world, starting with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then David, the 4th. They are Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, and Malchut. Another reference to this can be found in Isaiah 51:1 and 2. Hearken to me, you pursuers of righteousness, you seekers of the Lord. Look at the rock whence you were hewn, and at the hole of the pit whence you were dug. Look at Abraham, your father, and Sarah who bore you. For when he was but one, I called on him, and I blessed him and made him many. God is calling Abraham the rock. And the connection between Abraham and David is that Abraham knew that David would come from Ruth, right, who came from Moab, which is, from Lot and his daughters, which is why Lot was saved only by the merit of Abraham. Thereby, David was saved. There's a Abraham-David connection right there. And again, we discussed this. This is why Moabite and Ammonite men are not allowed. They are never allowed to convert. Why? Because Ammon and Moab were spared. The reason they lived was because of Abraham. And when Israel was going through, if you read over there in the book of Numbers, Israel was going through their land. Israel said, listen, we just want to cross through. They said, you're not crossing. Not only you're not crossing through, we're not giving you any water. We're not giving you bread. We're not giving you nothing. And they said, we don't need your water. We don't need your bread. We're not going to take not a sheep of your land, not nothing. We're just going to derech hamelech nelech. So God said, I don't appreciate ungrateful children. Don't appreciate it. Israel is the reason that you even exist. And they didn't even ask you for water. But you going out and saying, we're not giving you water? No problem. You will never enter. Only females are, which is why Ruth was allowed to convert. As later on in Psalms 118:22, the stone that the builders rejected became a cornerstone. This would also refer to David. The Maharzu says the following: the builders which the psalm refers to are those of this generation, meaning the literal builders of the tower, as they are the most famous builders in the Torah, right? It says they built a tower. Who were the builders? It's the only thing that comes to mind. I guess they did indeed make a name for themselves, not one to be, not one praiseworthy. And also because the tower was so high, it would take a whole year, like we said, to carry a brick from the bottom to the top. Furthermore, in regard to our text that says, is it not a fact that every choice and good stone is only put in the corner of the building? The Radal said the following: there is a hint here at Isaiah 28:16 that says, therefore, so has the Lord God said, behold, I have laid as a foundation, a stone in Zion, a fortress stone, a costly cornerstone, a foundation well-founded, the believer shall not hasten. Now this is the rock which Abraham clung to, which was presented to them, meaning the rock, this is God. No, you don't want it? Okay, no problem, which was presented to them, but they of course rejected. And for this reason, it was spoken over Babylon, which was built by the strength of Shinar, right? The very unholy ground on which they established themselves, the city and the tower. And we could read this in Jeremiah 51:26. And they shall take from you neither a stone for a corner, nor a stone for foundations, for you shall be desolate forever, says the Lord. Now we even see when this thing was referred. This is obviously referring to the final destruction of this order that started back then, that was brazen enough to try and take on God. And just for context, going back to Isaiah 28, I want to read a few verses before and then after the one we just read. So it's Isaiah 28:15-18. This is the end of the New World Order. Listen up. For you said, we have made a treaty with death, right? Who are they signing contracts with? And with the grave, we have set a limit. When an overflowing scourge passes, it shall not come upon us. For we have made lies our shelter, and falsehood we have hidden ourselves. We're in our bunkers. Nothing can touch us. Therefore, so has the Lord God said. In other words, your bunkers themselves, they are lies, you see. Therefore, so said the Lord God, behold, I have laid as a foundation a stone in Zion, a fortress stone, a costly cornerstone. That is your stone. That's what you want to be close to. That is what is going to protect you. A costly cornerstone, a foundation well-founded, the believer shall not hasten. And I will make justice the line and righteousness the plummet. And hail shall sweep away the shelter of lies, and water shall flood the hiding place. After reading this, would you dare go underground? Nothing could happen to me here. Okay. And your treaty with death shall be nullified. Nothing is coming to save you. And your limit with Sheol shall not endure. When an overflowing scourge passes, you shall be trampled by it. You're the ones that are getting it, not those who are clinging to me. Remember that wherever you are. Deals with the devil won't help you. Bunkers won't help you. Lies will not help you. You think you are hiding from what is coming as the rest of the world gets destroyed. But what you fail to understand is that which is coming specifically for you. And all who follow you, of course. You have no future, saith the Lord. Rabbi Shimon said, the Holy One, blessed be he, called to the 70 angels who surround the throne of his glory. And he said to them, come, let us. See the irony in that language? Come, let us descend, and let us confuse the 70 nations and the 70 languages. This is like the earthly Sanhedrin, right? Which consists of 70 elders, of 70 sitting around, plus one. Because, again, still got to take a vote over here, right? So the one, who is the one? The one was always a king, 71. 70 angels and the king. And if you may be trying to understand how the nations can have an effect on Israel, it's actually the other way around. It is Israel who affects the nations, who as a result affect Israel. When we're doing good, good. When we're doing bad, bad. That's how it is. And when we're not doing what we're supposed to do, bad, because we affect it negatively. And so the Sanhedrin down here control the Sanhedrin up there, always. Where else have we seen this kind of description? 1 Kings 22:19. And he said, therefore, listen to the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord seated on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven were standing by him on his right and on his left. This is the heavenly Sanhedrin. Even before the inhabitants of the world were officially split into 70 nations, there were the 70 heavenly hosts, the supernal Sanhedrin. And the reason they all went down was because we know that the Sanhedrin must sit in Jerusalem, God's holy city, which is in its center. It is God's temple, which connects heaven and earth, which is what they were trying to do here with the tower that they were building in the polar opposite of that. You understand? They're like, this is the center, but no, that's not the center. Whence do we know that the Holy One, blessed be he, spoke to them? Because it is said, come, let us go down, Genesis 11:7. I will go down. It is not written, but let us go down. And from where do we know that they cast lots among them? Because it is said, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance. Deuteronomy 32:8. Now let's read the full verse here so you understand, okay? That it all has to do with Israel, and the nations actually live according to Israel. Deuteronomy 32:8. When the Most High gave nations their lot, nations meaning the angels that control the nation, or that govern the nations, when he separated the sons of man, we're about to see it, he set up the boundaries of peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. Later on, the 70 soul of Jacob. All the nations have their own governing angel, and no one but the king himself governs Israel directly, as it is said in the next verse, because the Lord's portion is his people Jacob, the lot of his inheritance. Hey, it's mine. We tossed for it, or whatever, fair and square, and this is what I got. This is in reference to Exodus 1:5 that reads, now all those who descended from Jacob were 70 souls. Actually says Shivim Nefesh, and Joseph, who was in Egypt, right? Which is a reference to Genesis 46, where it gives the exact count of who descended to Egypt. So when we read verses 26 and 27 in Genesis 46, it says, all the souls, kol hanefesh, single, coming to Egypt with Jacob, those descended from him, excluding the wives, because we're talking about the males, excluding the wives of Jacob's sons, all the soul were 66. Kol nefesh shishim vashesh. And Joseph's sons who were born in Egypt, 2 souls, all the souls of the house of Jacob who came to Egypt were 70. What? How? 66. I mean, I'm bad at math, but come on. So 66 plus Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh. That's 69. How do we get to 70? Because the Lord's portion is his people Jacob, the lot of his inheritance. God counted himself within Jacob. He says, hey, right? You read before this, do not worry. Anochi ered imach. I will descend with you. I'm going with you. I'm one of you now. I'm right there with you. 70. So God counted himself with Jacob. And what does it mean when we read in Deuteronomy 32:8, when the Most High gave nations their lot, when he separated the sons of man, he set the boundaries of people according to the number of the children of Israel. The 70 nations are but a placeholder for Israel, as Israel are the only reason they exist to begin with. The lot of the Holy One, blessed be he, fell upon Abraham and upon his seed. He's like, that's my guy. As it is said, for the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. Now, we just read that God's lot fell upon Abraham and his seed, but that is not the original text. What it really says is that it fell upon Abraham and his house, not his seed. What is the difference between the house of Abraham and Abraham's seed? Ishmael is Abraham's seed, came from Abraham, right? Esav, Midian, and many other pagan nations came from Abraham's seed. Many of the world came from Abraham's seed. So, no, they do not fall within the house of Abraham. But the house of Abraham is very different. That means Isaac. That means Jacob, meaning Israel exclusively. I'm going to read this in Hebrew and I'm going to read it in English so you can hear the language. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, חבל וגורל זה שנפל עליי, רצתה נפשי, שנאמר חבלים נפלו לי בנעימים. The Holy One, blessed be he, said, it's poorly translated, but whatever. The portion and the lot which have fallen to me, my soul liveth thereby. In other words, רצתה נפשי, לרצות is desired, I wanted this, my nefesh wanted this. Thereby, as it is said in Psalm 16:6, portions have fallen to me in pleasant places, even the inheritances please me. Chavalim naflu li ban'imim, af nachalat shafra alai. Psalm 16:6. Before Israel accepted the Torah and before all the heavenly hosts were assigned to the 70 nations, and before the 70 nations were even separated, God offered the Torah to them all. No one wanted it, but Abraham did. God already chose Abraham from the beginning of creation. Genesis 2:4, right? Right. Be'avraham, be'hibaram. But none of that would have mattered if Abraham would not have chosen God in return. God already chose him, but it's free will. There's nothing that I can do. Did Abraham know that God chose him? He's 48 years old here. He's about to get tossed in the fire 2 years later. God never said a word to him. He literally bet his life on a God who has been all but silent, so to speak, and yet Abraham saw God in everything. If only, alevai aleinu, if only we could see God like that. And so, if it was his time to go, he would happily have given his life, which would have been meaningless without God anyway, then live according to this false lie that the world had already been peddling since the days of old, till this very day. What good is your life without God? It's very sad. I speak to people. I got all kinds of people I speak to, all kinds of friends, not only people from our group or people who watch the videos, but, real life friends. Many of them are secular. They are angry with God. They don't want a relationship with God because they think that, I don't want to do this and this and that, but they don't understand. It's not about the doing. It's about the connection. No one seems to understand these things. So in the meantime, you see their lives spiral out of control and they keep falling harder and harder and harder and they don't understand why. And yet still, they refuse to look at the one place that can actually help them. Right? Why is this happening to me? Well, you said you don't want to talk about it, so we can talk about something else, but that's why. So people are genuinely disconnected and generally also disconnected. Even amongst Orthodox, modern Orthodox Jews, they'll do everything they need to do. Yes, they follow the Torah and mitzvot. Wonderful. Probably better than I do. But where is that connection You understand what I'm saying? Where is that intent? The Ari has one of the 8 gates is called Shara Kavanot, the gate of intent or the gate of intentions, meaning, and these things are for us to learn. Every bracha that you do, what is behind it? Why do you do this bracha? Why do you do this mitzvah? What are you trying to connect to? It helps you take those things and, like, with the red string connecting all to one, and all of a sudden you get this big picture of what it is that you're doing, and then you finally realize that everything you do matters. Even things that you don't do matters. Everything is cause and effect. So it's about the desire to learn what is behind the scenes, how these things work. That was actually given to us. Anyway, I'm going on a rant right now, but let's get back, okay? So Abraham's about to get tossed into the fire. God didn't say a word to him, and he would rather die, believing in God than live without him, because really, what is the point? Because then we are dead men walking anyway. And so, like we said, if it was his time to go, he would have happily gone. So look at those who live without God in their lives today. Do not envy them, okay? For whatever they have is nothing more than an illusion. And whatever, all the riches and wealth or whatever goodness that you might think that they have, this is it for them. This is all they have. I pity them. Like we said, they're trading, 80, 100 excellent years for eternity. And with God, you don't want that, okay? We're almost done. You gotta hold on, right? You just gotta keep moving forward right now. As a result of this choice, there was reciprocity between God and man. This was the original plan with Adam, and Adam chose to disobey despite having all the knowledge in all the worlds. He did. But Abraham chose to obey, although no command was even given. Adam got one command, Abraham got none command, and yet Abraham chose to walk that course. See? Now, I'm not speaking of the Noahide laws, which, as we said, are the basis of all humanity. The Noahide laws are what keep this world turning. I'm talking about the Torah specifically. Abraham began to keep the mitzvot of the Torah before the Torah was ever given. He understood them. And although they were not commanded, he gladly chose to carry that yoke because he understood who gave it, right? If someone came to me and said, listen, you want to join my group? Here's a book this thick with do's and don'ts, and oh boy, is a punishment. Like, I'm good, thank you. That's not what it is. But let's say, listen, I'm going to take you to the head of the group. Have a conversation with them, see what's up. And then once you get to know God, right? And then you see, wait, so this is coming from, yes, what else can I do? Tell me more. So that's sort of how it is. But here's the catch, though. You can't get to know God like that, right? How do you get to know God? Through the mitzvot, which is why we could see a person's soul by how obedient they are to the teachings of the Torah. That's how you know. He's like, okay, where's God? I don't know. Look at Abraham, right? No one spoke to him, and yet this was his choice. We try to live like Abraham, right? That's the best we could do. Okay. So he gladly chose to carry this yoke. This is the difference between us and the rest of the world. They see these commands, as a burden, which is why they remove them from themselves. The Christians, the Messianics, all this stuff. Yeah, we're reading Torah, but no, it's not a way. Okay, hey, no problem. You know exactly where they're from. That's why it's not even, there's no competition here. There's no, oh no, please. Where in history did Jews ever try and convert Christians? Nowhere. We just want to be left alone. Sure, dude, worship death. We don't care. We just leave us, right? So they don't realize that God and his Torah are one and the same. And Israel is in there, by the way. The mitzvot are a privilege. That's why we say before the blessing from the Torah, Asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav, who has blessed us with his command. His command is a blessing to us. The Holy One, blessed be he, descended with the 70 angels who surrounded the throne of his glory, and they confused their speech into 70 nations and 70 languages. Each one became a nation with their own writing and their own tongue. As he appointed an angel over every nation, and Israel were his lot. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, like we discussed. How do we know that the Holy One, blessed be he, descended? Because it is said, and the Lord God came down to see the city and the tower, Genesis 11:5. You will see that the next couple of verses, there were two purposes for the descent over here. The first is that although God did not have to descend to see anything, it is written that he did so because one cannot make a judgment call without seeing and investigating the matter for themselves. When God called upon the sons of Noah to appoint righteous judges, this is exactly what he meant. And we could even take this with Moses. God said to Moses when he was on the mountain, seeing the golden calf, Lech, red, go, descend. It said Moses dropped 1,000 levels of Kedusha from that moment. You understand? Never got it back in his life. Dropped 1,000 levels. Lech, red, because your people have already corrupted and destroyed. Your people, wait a minute. God doesn't speak like that about Israel. Israel are his people. He called them, Israel's my firstborn son. They are my servants. They are my sons. Banim atem l'Hashem Elokechem. Your people? He was obviously referring to the Erev Rav, who then corrupted his people, which is why he was really upset. But then at that moment, what did Moses say? Moses did not believe God, but it's God who's saying it. It's God who's saying that clearly they're corrupt. No, there's got to be some sort of mistake. And Moses refused to believe, rightfully so, because Moses was following the Torah that God gave him. And Moses had to go see it for himself, right? In today, unfortunately, and again, also coming from the Messianic world, whatever the rabbi says, you can't question that, because if you do, you're questioning God. You see that? That's not what Moses did. So who exactly are you following, right? No one goes to investigate. It's whatever the rabbi said, and that's it. No question. The truth doesn't matter because that's truth, and everything else is a lie by default. And now you know exactly where these people are going. So when God called upon the sons of Noah and appointed the righteous judges to judge righteously, you have to go and investigate. You claim this, you claim that, great, no problem. 2 witnesses claim it, great. Let's hear from the defendant, let's investigate the matter, then let's make a judgment call. See how that works. Furthermore, don't forget, God is everywhere because God is everything. God is not up there and not down here. God is everywhere. He's everywhere. He's everywhere. It is the God particle that is within, in, and all around everything that is God, if you will. God is everywhere and everything. He's you. He's me. He's all the goodness in the world. He's all the badness in the world because it all comes from him. This is just for us that we should understand. Come, let us descend. Does God need to do that? No. All the language in the Torah is so we can somehow identify. Terms like up there and down here are for us to somewhat not lose our minds. What did God see when he descended? And the Lord said, lo, they are one people, and they all have one language. And this is what they have commenced to do. In other words, they could have done anything. They could have turned the world into a utopia. And this is what they wanted to do. Now I will not be withheld from them all that they have planned to do. Okay, we're done right now. Party's over. Now remember the lingo that that the New World Order used before, as did Pharaoh when he called upon his people to enslave Israel, right? What God said, Hava v'yomer Hashem hen am echad safachad lekulam. This is what they want to do? No problem. Here we go. Hava Nagila, you guys are Hava, let's enslave Israel. Hava, let's go build a tower. Hava Nagila, angels, let's do this. Okay, here's some godly poetic justice. Hava nereda v'nivale sham sfatam. Come, let us descend and confuse their language so that one will not understand the language of his companion. They weren't split into, okay, every level of the tower, this is this language. No, then your best buddy. What are you saying right now? This was the second descent, where it says Hava Nered. Remember, a few months ago, we discussed the 10 descents of God in chapter 14, titled The Aftermath. I discussed them, I think, close to the beginning of the video. Discuss 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The last one is to come. So this was number 2. And they wished to speak to one another in the holy language in Hebrew. Oh no, you don't get to speak Hebrew. In the language of his fellow countrymen, but one did not understand the language of his fellow. As we discussed, there is only one holy tongue, one language. When people say, yabba-dabba-labba-shabba-labba-da, I'm speaking the language of the angels, you know they're lying. Because Hebrew... I mean, really? You think the angels speak in that language? What language do you think they speak? It's language of the Torah. That's creation of all the things. They don't need a haba yabba dabba do. This is it. Okay. Anyway, so one holy tongue, one language used to create all of reality as we know it. This is the language God spoke the world into existence. This is the language of the angels, and this is the only language in the world until that time, Hebrew. Which is why they had the power to create things. What did they do? Everyone took his sword and they fought one another to destroy one another. This is the same wording as 2 Chronicles 20:23. And the children of Ammon and Moab rose up against the inhabitants of Mount Seir to destroy and annihilate. And when they finished with the inhabitants of Seir, each one helped his friend to destroy the mashchit. This teaches us that the destruction from civil war is far greater than kingdom against kingdom. Because if that's the case, that means that every able body is lifting a sword and going to kill or be killed. Which means, by default, you're cutting the population into half. As a result, half the world fell by the sword, instantly. This happened the moment they could no longer communicate with one another. This shows the false sense of enlightenment and morality that the New World Order was selling. The moment there is no dialogue, these base people are beneath animals. I would say acting like animals. Animals don't act like this. 50% of the population, gone. This is called the generation of dispersion. In Hebrew, it is dor hapalaga. And like we said, the word palaga comes from the word pilug, division. Now, I'll tell you something very funny, okay? We've discussed this before, but here it is again. You know, the White House, right, is ironically called the White House. In Hebrew, it's Beit Lavan, the house of Lavan, the greatest wielder of dark magic in the history of the world, the grandfather of Bilam, who taught him everything that he knew. I say ironically because the White House was by default where the darkness emerges from, and so it is today. While the real White House, because there's always a counterfeit, is God's temple in Jerusalem called HaLevanon, literally translates as the whitening. HaLevanon, the whitening, the house of the whitening. Why? The house which turns your sins, crimson, into white as snow. HaHar HaTov Hazeh, HaLevanon, the temple. But no, let's build us the White House right there in good old Washington, D.C. Have you ever noticed what's all around there and on the streets? No? Take a look. So here's some more irony for you. We have discussed many a time the meaning of Knesset Israel, right? Knesset Israel literally means the gathering of Israel. Knesset Israel. We've discussed it, okay? When all of Israel are gathered together as one man, one mind, obviously one tongue, the Shekhinah which rests upon each and every one of Israel, no matter where they are in the world, now all of a sudden is complete, is united. There's unity right now. And when this finally happens, in other words, Kibbutz HaGaluyot, once all of Israel come to the land of Israel together, what finally happens? That is when the great Yichud, unity, will take place between the Holy and Blessed be He and the Shekhinah. That's it. God is our Father. The Shekhinah is likened to our Ima, our mother, who went into exile with her sons. and now everyone is returning together. So while this, what I just described, is the real Knesset Israel, this could be found in all the rabbinical texts. Where is the counterfeit? About a mile north of here. You can even see it from the window. Not too far from where the real White House is going to stand. So the counterfeit Knesset of Israel is essentially the Israeli parliament. And what are the parties in said parliament called? Miflagot, divisions. While the real Knesset of Israel is the literal unity of all Israel. In the counterfeit Knesset, by default, unity can never, ever, by design, it can never happen because they're called miflagot. Dol hapalaga, the generation of dispersion. Miflaga, palaga. No unity here. Never, ever, ever, ever by design. Which is why just like that White House got to crumble, this here fake building got to crumble, and all its inhabitants and everyone involved. It's all got to go. This is written in Masechet Sanhedrin. Please read it for yourselves. So not only am I praying and waiting for the fake White House to come crashing down along with the corrupt system, which still runs from back in the day, I'm waiting and praying for the same to happen to the fake Knesset. There are no favorites here. Truth and lies. End of story. Which causes division amongst the Jews governed by the same corrupt system. The moment we said, let us be like the rest of the nations, we now live under the system or in the system of the rest of the nations. The weird choosing God system. And guess what though? Here's the other problem. I understand modern times and all these things. But God's system and man's system, and when I say man's system, I mean NWO. It's all the same system all over. Nothing is real. You don't really vote. Your votes don't count. I hope you understand that. There's no, and if you still don't believe that, again, get the book, The Secret War Against the Jews. Republicans, Democrats, it don't matter. They're Nazis everywhere. So, it's all governed by the same corrupt system, and these systems must fall. They have to. So, okay, let's stop on that, and we'll just continue moving on. And this is going to happen, as we have read plenty of times. Everything must fall in order for God's government to rise. That's it. So, you could be angry with me, no problem. I'll revert you back to the sources, and then that's it. You could take it up with God and with the sages. The moment Israel are united in Tshuva, Mashiach comes. End of story. End of story. En Yisrael nigalim ela b'tshuva. That's it. Tshuva, boom. Geula. Why? Why wait any longer than that? As long as there's a Knesset, by default, Israel can never be unified and never do tshuva. But this is what's keeping the tshuva from happening. But the New World Order made absolute sure to place them there so this would never happen. And I pray, may they never know a day or a moment of peace in this world and to eternity for what they have done and what they continue to do. So, everyone took his sword and they fought one another to destroy each other, which is basically what they're doing today. It's, oh, you hate him and you hate him and you hate him. Oh, I have to choose a party to go kill, I'll just sit here and watch you idiots kill yourselves. And they fought one another to destroy each other, and half the world fell there by the sword. And then, as a result, and thence the Lord scattered them upon the face of all the earth, as it is said in Genesis 11:8, and the Lord scattered them from there upon the face of the entire earth, and they ceased building the city. Yeah, that's how you stop something from going down. These were the survivors, the ones who had to kill in order to be killed. Everyone's hand was covered in blood, everyone that lived. And not only that, it wasn't that God separated them according to sections. We're talking about friends, family members, people close to one another who in one moment spoke the same language and the next could not do so. So they killed one another. The New World Order is so obsessed with population reduction that they're essentially doing the Lord's work and they don't even know it. It's happening. Absolutely population reduction, but not according to what they want to do. You see? We see, right? I'm not making these things up. We are reading this. Okay. All this has to happen again. They think they're the ones doing it. Ha! Come on. So, what happened to the tower and the city? Babylon. They transferred to the Western Hemisphere. All right. Well, needless to say, they stopped building the tower as God took care of that one. Remember, we discussed the verse from Zechariah 14, and it shall come to pass throughout all the lands, says the Lord, 2 parts of it shall be cut off, dead, right? They shall perish, and the third shall remain therein. These are the nations that are going to get it. And what? And that is that's what God did to the tower. A third was completely destroyed. Now, it doesn't say it in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. It says it in the Zohar, but I'll give you a little bit. There's a lot going on here, but we got a lot. We got enough on our plate. This is what we're trying to focus on right now. So a third of the tower was completely destroyed. A third sunk into the ground, and a third remains above ground as a reminder about how quickly we forget. So you could say, okay, where is it today? I don't know. It's been 4,000 years, Things don't actually necessarily hold, especially if you start building on top of them. But then again, if you find out what went down in 2003 over there in Babylon, in Iraq, Babylon, then you'll see exactly what Saddam Hussein was building and where America went and what exactly they were looking for. It wasn't WMDs. Well, actually, it was, but not the kind you think. All right. So, how quickly we all forget. When man makes plans, God laughs. Remember when Nimrod said, "Come, let us build a great city for ourselves, and let us dwell therein, lest we be scattered upon the face of all the earth as the first people were"? How'd that work out for them? Not so good, right? People should take notes, but they don't care. So we said, evil or stupid, or just really stupid, or just more evil than stupid. Take your pick. Either way, it's not going to end well. Rabbi Meir said, Esau, the brother of Jacob, saw the coats that God made for Adam and Eve on Nimrod, and he coveted them in his heart. Now, we all know these stories, right? From the book of Jasher, straight out of the book of Jasher. If you don't, I'll read it for you right now, because it's very interesting. And Esau, at the time, after the death of Abraham, frequently went into the field to hunt, because he was a hunter, right? And Nimrod, king of Babel, the same was Amarpal, also frequently went with his mighty men. His name was also Amarpal, he was one of the 4 kings that Abraham defeated, and he went back in shame to Babylon. Now you could read that in the Torah. Mighty men in the field, and to walk about with his men in the cool of the day. And Nimrod was observing Esau all the days, for a jealousy was formed in the heart of Nimrod against Esau all the days, right? Nimrod had beef with Abraham, Isaac and Esau and Jacob right now. He had beef. Okay, anyway, listen. And on a certain day, what is this certain day? You'll see this in a second. On a certain day, Esau went out into the field, and he found Nimrod walking in the wilderness with his 2 men. And all his mighty men and his people were with him in the wilderness, but they were removed at a distance from him. They were a little bit further behind. And they went from him in different directions to hunt. And Esau concealed himself for Nimrod, and he lurked for him in the wilderness. And Nimrod and his men that were with him did not know him. And Nimrod and his men frequently walked about in the field at the cool of the day, and to know where his men were hunting in the field. And Nimrod and 2 of his men that were with him came to the place where they were, when Esau started suddenly from his lurking place and drew his sword and hastened and ran to Nimrod, cut his head off. And Esau fought a desperate fight with the 2 men that were with Nimrod. And when they called out to him, Esau turned to them and smote them to death with his sword. And all the mighty men of Nimrod, who had left him to go to the wilderness, heard the cry at a distance, and they knew the voices of those men, and they ran to know the cause of it, when they found their king and the 2 men that were with him lying dead in the wilderness. And when Esau saw the mighty men of Nimrod, again, these weren't like mighty, right? How old was Esau at this point? Esau was 15 years of age. When Esau saw the mighty men of Nimrod coming at a distance, he fled and thereby escaped. And Esav took the valuable garments of Nimrod, which Nimrod's father had bequeathed to Nimrod, and which Nimrod prevailed over the whole land, and he ran and concealed them in his house. Now, in whose house did he conceal them? Not in his house, in Isaac's tent. And Esav took those garments and ran into the city on account of Nimrod's men, and he came into his father's house, wearied and exhausted from a fight, and he was ready to die through grief when he approached his brother Jacob and sat before him. And he said unto his brother Jacob, stop me if you know this, behold, I shall die this day, and wherefore? Then do I want the birthright. And Jacob acted wisely with Esav in this matter, and Esav sold his birthright to Jacob, for it was so brought about by the Lord. And Esav's portion in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham had brought from the children of Heth for the possession of a burial ground, Esav also sold to Jacob everything. For what? Nazid adashim, lentils. Why were they eating lentils? Because lentils are round, right? They're round. Why? What are round things supposed to remind us of? The circle of life. Life and death. Who died? Abraham. This was at Abraham's Shiva. This is the food that you make in Shiva. And he's looking at this food. And he started coveting this food. In other words, I don't believe in the world to come. I don't believe in any of this mumbo jumbo. Give me this right now. You could take all these promises are for the future. Take it. Generations, whatever. Just give me my here and my now. And he said, you sure you want this? Yeah. And what did he do? He didn't give him a bowl to eat from. He said, open your mouth and I will pour this in. This min ha'adom ha'adom from this red stuff. So he's called Edom for that. Esav consumed, just like he does, consumes, consumerism, right? America, Edom, consume, give it to me, give me everything, I want it, and I want it big, and I want it now. Costco. Okay. And Jacob wrote the whole of this in a book, and he testified the same with witnesses, and he sealed it, and the book remained in the hands of Jacob. And when Nimrod, the son of Cush, died, his men lifted him up, and brought him in consternation, and buried him in his city. Yeah, 2003. What tombs were they looking for? And all the days of Nimrod, who lived, were 215 years, and he died. And the days of Nimrod reigned upon all the people of the land were 185 years. And Nimrod died by the sword of Esav in shame and contempt. And the seed of Abraham caused his death, as he had seen in his dream. Yep. So here's your backstory. Now back to the text. Rabbi Meir said, Esav, the brother of Jacob, saw the coats that God made for Adam and Eve on Nimrod, and he coveted them in his heart. It says, V'chamad otam belibo. And he slew him and took them from him. Whence do we know that they were desirable, chamudot, in his sight? Because it is said in Genesis 27:15, Vatikach Rivka et bigdei Esav bna hagadol hachamudot asher ita babayit. And Rebekah took the costly garments of Esav, her elder son. It doesn't say costly, that's what I'm trying to say. Which were with her in the house, meaning this is in Isaac's house, not in his house. And she dressed Jacob, her younger son. This is when Jacob was going forward. Now, check this out. This is fascinating. Our sages say that the only reason Ham was allowed to steal those clothes, those garments, was to give them to Nimrod, the nemesis of Abraham. There always has to be balance, right? And so on the very day that Abraham died and they were sitting Shiva, he still had something up his sleeve for Nimrod, as his own grandson slew him. Not only that, but Esav, like we said, was only 15 years old at the time, and Nimrod was a mighty warrior, in addition to him wearing the powerful garments. And it didn't mean anything. This is the other thing. Why was Isaac so concerned with Esav and less so with Jacob? Because he saw Jacob is learning Torah. All the blessings in the world, they could still not come close to what you get when you actually learn Torah. So I'll give all the blessings to Esav. Hopefully he'll be able to do tshuva and do some good with it. But Jacob is, dude, the guy's hooked up. He's learning Torah his whole life. Ishtam Yoshevu Alim. He walked with God, and everything that he did was righteous. It was good. He is Emet. He is Tiferet. He is Israel. I can't give him any blessings better than what he would be receiving from God. You see? But then once all these things happened, we said, oh, no. He gave all these things up, which means, and we'll see this in a second, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. So he was 15 years old at the time, because despite Esav being the incarnation of evil, he still comes from the seed of Abraham. Do you see how there must always be a perfect balance between good and evil? If Abraham is gone from the world, Nimrod also has to be gone from the world. When Abraham and all his goodness leaves, the polar opposite leaves with him. Because now we have Isaac and his opposite, who? Ishmael. Jacob and his opposite, Esav. Always got to be a balance over there. When he, Esav, put them on, and he also became, by means of them, a mighty hero, as it is said in Genesis 25:27, and the youths grew up, and Esav was a man who knew hunting, a man of the field, whereas Jacob was an innocent man dwelling in tents. Ish tam yoshev alim. So Esav was ish yodei tzayid, ish hasadeh, both, meaning a man of the field, so he was a hunter, but then it said ish tzayid because of these garments. Ve'akov ish tam yoshev alim. It says this is what happened vayigdalu hanerim, when they became older. And when Jacob went forth from the presence of Isaac his father, he said, Esav, the wicked one, is not worthy to wear these coats. When Esav gave up the Bechorah, he gave up the Beracha. Same letters right there. Bechorah, the firstborn, is called the Bechol, right? And a blessing is called, so Bechorah is the right of the firstborn and everything that came with it, which is the same spelling as Bracha, blessing, gave it up. And these were no ordinary garments. Did Jacob become a mighty hunter afterwards? Do we see, and Jacob was a mighty hunter when he wore the garment there? No. These garments seemingly emitted a smell, that of the Garden of Eden, which we can read from the exchange between Isaac and Jacob, right? I sell the sun. It smells like the Garden of Eden. But when Nimrod and Esav wore the garments, did they smell like the Garden of Eden? No, because these garments were made for Adam and Eve from the skin of the serpent. Listen to this, like we learned. So, when an evil man wears them, it only accentuates his greed and bloodlust. You see, it depends on who wears them. The man makes the clothes. And when a righteous man wears them, he realizes he doesn't need them. The scent that's coming off is the scent of the Torah. That is the smell of the Garden of Eden. So in all actuality, what Isaac was smelling was the Torah upon his son Jacob that had only been more emphasized by the garments. Remember, Jacob looked identical to Adam. Adam was initially supposed to bear Israel and only Israel. The first child of Adam was supposed to be Israel. And there we go. But, there was a slight detour, courtesy of the Samech Mem and the serpents. What did he do? He dug in the earth and he hid them. Jacob did. And he hid them there, as it is said, a noose is hid for him in the earth. Job 18:10. You see, power, strength, control. Notice those who chase it. Really notice them. Pay attention. Who wants power, strength, and control? Those are the last ones who should wield it. Jacob had no need for these garments. I'm good. He's good because he had the same mind frame of David, who was and will be the final tikkun for Adam when he said in Psalms 121:2, my help is from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Ezri im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. I don't need garments right now. I got it. Torah, everything. Etz chaim, right? And I'll give you another fun fact right now. We know that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then David were the tikkun for Adam. After Isaac returned from the altar, right, his tikkun in this world was complete as far as Adam goes, as not all of him returned from heaven. Most of them remained up there. But God gave him a long life and children and many other blessings because Esav and Jacob needed to be born. Plus, he should live a good life, for giving his own. While Sarah, Rivka, Leah, and Rachel made a tikkun for Eve, for Chava, primarily Sarah. It said, where does it say this? I'll find the source of where it says it. It said all the women of the world looked like monkeys compared to Sarah. Sarah was the most beautiful woman you couldn't imagine. And it said that Sarah looked like a monkey compared to Eve. Chava, right? The first woman ever. So we're talking, we can't, different levels. I just learned today, by the way, that Eve was a redhead. Interesting. Okay, that's in, where is it? Tikunei Zohar Nun Tet, I think. Anyway, maybe I'll find it if someone actually really cares. But Eve was a redhead. Okay, so primarily Sarah did a tikkun for Eve. Now, when Sarah was gone, we learned what happened. We have taught on this plenty of times. Rivka spiritually speaking, took her place. She went into her tent. The fire was relit. Isaac was comforted for his mother because it's like the same spirit was there now with Rivka, right? So now we have Rivka, who has the spark of Sarah, who has the spark of Eve, and Jacob, who has the spark of Adam, okay? In this incarnation, they came in as mother and son, right? Now, Rivka, Eve, is telling Jacob, Adam, to go and deceive his father. What? Which is why his neshama questioned that move, saying, I feel that we've been in a situation like this before. Last time I listened to you, it didn't really work out too well. In fact, I got more curses than I can handle. So, to which she replied, oh, don't you worry. See, I'm the mother now. Look at me. I am the mother now, right? Don't you worry now. I see things a bit clearer than you do, and I know exactly how to deal with this snake garments. You get it? How do you use that? Genesis 27:13, and his mother said to him, on me is your curse. This is Eve talking to Adam. Only hearken to my voice and go take them for me. And this time, things did work out. Tikkun, wonderful. And that's our class for today. All right, so we concluded just now chapter 24. Next week, we start chapter 25, and we will be discussing Sodom and Gomorrah. So stick around, should be fun. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye.